Hey y'all, welcome to Sandy's Library. I'm Sandy, and this video is the first in a three-part series where we're going to talk about the supernatural and some other trippy shit. These are old family tales about my grandmother's people, so if you need visuals, there are links posted in the description outlining both of my grandparents' family trees. And when you consider how much the subject of religion has dominated some of the last few videos, you might not think that we'd ever be talking about Belle Hawkins Fuller and her son-in-law, Willie Williams, having supernatural abilities such as levitation, stopping blood from pouring from a wound, removing warts, healing burns, and they did it all by chanting. Oh yeah. And, I heard all my life that both Willie and Belle could levitate tables and other pieces of furniture. And, according to these stories, Belle was constantly being challenged to perform her miraculous feat with 2 to 3 grown men sitting on top of the table. And it's said that Belle never failed to raise the table. So, am I the only one who's going to mention the obvious? I mean, our half-cousin talks about these old family tales, yet he never once mentions some very obvious details. Like, for instance, why was Belle always getting challenged about her levitating ability? That can only mean one thing, y'all. And I know that I know what that one thing is. And I think y'all know what it is too. My big question here is, was she doing it as free entertainment? Or was she actually making money off of it? I mean, let's be real. Belle was obviously bragging about her abilities to get challenged in the first place. Now, let me be clear before we get into the meats and bones of the stories that our half-cousin told. Let me just say, for the record, Sissy and her siblings always said that Grandma Fuller, Belle Hawkins, taught Willie these supernatural abilities. I, for one, would love to know where in the hell she picked them up at. And there's one old family tale that demonstrates the two of them using their mysterious chanting abilities. This particular incident happened on a Wednesday evening shortly after my grandmother's first cousin, Mattie Fuller, married my grandmother's stepbrother, James Mobley. And I really wish our half-cousin would have been concerned about notating dates for these stories, but here we are. That said, I'm going to date them as much as I can. So, when I checked the 1930 census, I saw that James and Mattie Mobley had been married for 10 years. So we can figure this incident must have happened around 1920-ish. Okay, so for the RLDS church, Wednesdays was prayer meeting night. And the trouble all started when Mattie didn't want to go. She decided to stay home instead. So here Mattie is settling in for a quiet evening at home, where she commences to take off her shoes, which were actually those lace-up boots that women used to wear back then. But anyway, one of her boot laces was knotted up so tightly that she couldn't loosen it. So what does Mattie do? She gets a pair of scissors and uses the blade's point to loosen the knot. Only problem was, the damn scissors slipped and stabbed her in the shin. Now, our half-cousin says chin in his manuscript, but to be honest, I don't know if he thought it was shin or chin. The man didn't know how to spell half the words in his manuscript. And I'm not trying to be mean either. I just find it incredibly ironic that the person who declared himself the family historian didn't know how to spell. But anyway, back to Maddie and her deep gash that begins to bleed freely. So, Maddie's husband James grabs a cloth and applies pressure to her wound, but he's unable to stop the bleeding. And let me just point out the elephant in the room right now. James didn't attend that prayer meeting either. But anyway, James can't stop the bleeding, and they're both becoming a little bit frightened over it. So Maddie asks James to go to the church to get her parents, Heman and Lum Fuller. Heman was Lizzie's brother. So, once James arrives at the church and reports what's happened, the services are wrapped up quickly, and James returns home with Heman, Lum, and Willie. These people are all related, y'all, in one manner or another. Willie is James' stepfather. Willie is also Heman's brother-in-law. So these people are all interconnected. As the story goes, Grandma Fuller wasn't able to accompany them to the Mobley home. But it's said that she did say a prayer charm for Maddie anyway. Willie was said to have chanted all the way over to the Mobley house. Shortly after they all arrived, Maddie's bleeding stopped. Now, I don't claim to know where the Mobleys were living at this time, but if it's anywhere near where I knew them to live, which is knee-deep in Fuller country, and knowing where the church was, all I can say is it took quite some time to travel from the Mobley's home to the church house and back, on horseback or by wagon. And hell, if Maddie was bleeding all that profusely, one would think that she would have bled to death before James returned with her parents. But anyway, it's said that Maddie's bleeding stopped, and Willie always said that he didn't know if it was Grandma Fuller or his own prayer that stopped the bleeding. Our half-cousin ends this short piece with, Maddie's mother, Lum Fuller, always believed that this accident happened because Maddie didn't want to go to the prayer meeting. Yeah, well, James didn't go either. How come he made it out unscathed? Excuse me. Another story about Willie's abilities came from Elise Gerald, who our half-cousin misidentifies as Willie's granddaughter. She was not Willie's granddaughter. She was his great-granddaughter. Her grandmother was Julia Bell, Willie's daughter. So, now that we've got that out of the way, we can tell Elise's story. So, as the story goes, when Elise was a little girl, and she was born in 1930, y'all, but she and Katie Lou Cooper, Willie's stepdaughter, were playing outside when they found an old Indian arrowhead. And y'all, when I was a kid, those things were everywhere. Every time my grandfather plowed the fields, I'd run along behind the tractor picking up the arrowheads. I collected a ton of those things when I was a kid. So anyway, this particular arrowhead was incredibly shiny, and the girls thought it had diamonds encased inside it. Elise explained that, being very young, they thought they could get to the jewels if they could split it open. So, what do? Elise goes and gets the axe. She tries to break open the arrowhead, but has no luck. So Katie Lou, being a little older and possibly stronger, decides to give it a try. And y'all, she does manage to chip that arrowhead. And a piece of it flies off and slices into Elise's leg, right where an artery lies. It's said that with every beat of Elise's heart, blood squirted from her leg. So, Elise tells us that when Willie saw her injury, he mumbled his charm, and sure enough, the blood stopped squirting out with each heartbeat. Since Elise was just a child at the time, she couldn't remember the words that Willie had chanted. But I'm guessing that this incident had to have happened before Willie's stroke in 1936. So yeah, Elise was really little at the time. I wish that Elise would have undergone hypnosis before she passed away. I would love to know what those words were that Willie chanted. The stories from Elise are littered haphazardly throughout our half-cousin's manuscript, and in this one he again incorrectly identifies her as Willie's granddaughter. She was not Willie's granddaughter. That would have been her mother, Lula Grider Vanderberg. But this tale again involves Elise and Willie's stepdaughter, Katie Lou, and Willie performing a parlor trick for their pleasure. I believe this must have happened in the early 1930s, as it would have been hard for Willie to pull this off after his stroke in 1936. But anyway, Elise said that Willie would take a pair of scissors and lay them flat on the table. Then he'd mumble his charm and place his forefinger on the table, where he'd proceed to draw a few circles around the scissors. And then, Elise said, the most astonishing thing happened. As Willie slowly pulled his hand away from the table, all the while chanting, the scissors would stand up on the ends of its blades, and for a split second, the scissors would tremble and then proceed to walk across the table. Elise reported that she and Katie Lou were mystified, and they never knew if it was actually magic or just a simple trick. I will say this, making scissors walk, that's no simple trick, and honestly, y'all, I'm not sure how that would have been accomplished without some high-tech help. I Googled it, y'all, and I can't find a thing about such a parlor trick. I just don't see how such a parlor trick could have been performed in the 1930s. If you know of a way, it doesn't involve costly equipment, please make your own video and tell us how it's done. Or, better yet, show us. Elise also reported that Willie removed a wart from her leg by pointing to it and chanting his charmed words. She said he told her not to pay attention to it anymore and to forget about it. She reported that the next week the wart was gone, and it didn't even leave a scar. Look, y'all, I knew Elise very well. And y'all, I moved away from Louisiana decades ago. But she used to write me letters until she passed away. I might pull one of them out and read it to y'all one of these days. But anyway, Elise was a gifted artist, but she was not a fabricator of tales. If she says these things happened, they happened. Okay, y'all, so I think this video is long enough, but don't worry, we'll be back with part 2 real soon, because there's lots more to tell. So, until next time, later, Gators.